Unnecessary intro song to totally waste your time. Have you ever had anybody insist that a detail of your life was not as you thought it was, or that you claim it was? Like something you know, like who your parents are, where you're from, or when you did a certain thing. I remember this has happened many times in my life, and who knows why, but I imagine it's happened in your life too at some point. But I remember one time this guy on the internet, a guy that I knew from being out, late at night, he told me a thing. He goes, "Yeah, but you bought your house with a trust fund. You're a trust fund kid." And I'm like, "No, I didn't. You told me that." I said, "No, I didn't. Why would I tell you something like that? I grew up poor. I didn't have any money. There's 17 kids. And no, I did not buy my house using trust fund money." "Oh, yes, you did. Yes, you did. You told me that." "No, I didn't. And the only time I've ever known you was when you were drunk and on drugs. But why would I ever say something like, if I'm going to make up a lie?" Anyway, the point is this person insisted that not only I had told him it, but that it was true. He was doubling down, like, this is a true story. It's a story that he wrote in his own mind, but he insisted that it was true. And it was fascinating to me that he kept doubling down, that I had to engage in this argument with him about it. That instead of just saying, "Oh, okay, I must have misunderstood something," or whatever, he was doubling down. I thought, why? What's going on here? And I thought, did you tell somebody else that? Have you staked your reputation on it? Is this gonna cause embarrassment for you somehow? Because certainly you're just not going to win with me by telling me that I told you, trying to convince me to change the actual details of my life to conform with what you imagined you heard one time at a party, or who knows what the fuck you're doing. But it's just fascinating that happened. This guy I blocked on the internet, he's a weirdo, drug addict, strange person. Anyway, but it's not only that, but I also got a message just recently from somebody in my inbox that asked me what was the process that I went through to sue the church, to sue the Mormon church. And I said, "I never sued the Mormon church." "Yes, you did. You told me you did." I said, "No, I didn't. I never sued the Mormon church." "You told me you sued the church." "No, I didn't." And then I explained, I said, "There's fiction going around in Salt Lake City that I sued the Mormon church, and that's why I own this huge mansion in San Francisco, because that was a story that started going around Salt Lake City after I left. And I know the origins of it, and it's because one time on a porch at a little party, I was talking about how funny it would be to sue the church for back tithing and the money I spent on my Mormon mission, because I felt a little bit jilted, whatever, to say, and how funny it would be to, well, Your Honor, I call Jesus Christ to the stand as he is declared the head of the Mormon church. Anyway, it was just a something I said on a porch one night, like a what if, ha ha ha. Wouldn't it be funny if? Well, that story turned into a telephone game, and certain people just believe it. And I admit that over the years, I didn't do much to dispel it when I heard that it was that was a rumor about me. I didn't start dialing phone numbers and say, "Who told you that? I need to correct the record." Blah, blah. I didn't do anything like that. I just was like, okay, haha, that's pretty funny. That there's this rumor that I'm a fat cat living high on the hog, and I bought a huge mansion in San Francisco off the money that I won suing the Mormon church, you know. But this woman was a woman I knew, and she just, again, same situation. No, you did. You sued the church. And when I was saying, no, I didn't, and no, I never told you that, and I explained the details of how that story evolved and how that came to be. Okay, well, we can just agree to disagree. And I'm like, no, wait, you don't get to disagree about the facts of my life. That's not a disagreement. You're just wrong. Anyway, to me, that's what's happening with a lot of this stuff, with the Epstein stuff, with the people develop stories and movies that they play in their minds, and then it's they claim that they want the truth. I want the truth. But to me, what it looks like is that people want their own fantasies to be confirmed. And that's what they want. They just want the confirmation. In both of those scenarios, and there are others from my life that are like that too, where it's just boggling. It's mind-boggling that somebody could look you in the face and tell you that you don't know the facts of your own life. You know? Well, you don't really know how you bought this house. Well, you know? And I feel like it's that way with a lot of this. It's not just the Epstein thing. With a lot of things, people look at the world and they, with the small slivers of information they get, they extrapolate a story in their mind. I know I'm kind of repeating myself from what I said yesterday, but it bears repeating that confirmation bias is a strange thing, and the internet only increases that, because what happens, like even right now, is like, well, Pam Bondi said she had the files on her desk. It's just like, okay, go back and look at the thing. She said she has a bunch of things on her desk. She didn't say she had a list of whatever. She said, I have things on my desk to look at. And she even said that the FBI is looking at it. She's not the FBI. But the point is that people remember things the way they want to. There's this great video of a guy who says never, he's a lawyer and a professor or whatever, and this video was taken years ago of him giving a speech in front of a classroom of why you should never, ever talk to police, you know? And he seems like a guy, a good guy and whatever, but he just goes through this thing, and you should look it up, why you should never, ever talk to police. But he goes through a scenario where he gives people some information. He tells them about a crime that occurred. He gives them the details, and then he goes and off onto a different tangent, talks about something else. But then towards the end of the video, he comes back. Remember that story I told you at the beginning? Well, and then he asks some questions about it. He goes something to the effect of, how many men were there, or when did the man rape the woman? And then it comes out that people answer the question incorrectly, and they filled in blank information. In other words, they put information into the story that he didn't provide, you know? And that was the demonstration. The demonstration was that even after 5 minutes, you can think that you heard a story one way when you didn't hear it that way, you know? And you can rewind the tape. You can look and you can say, that's right, he did not give anybody the information that he asked about just 5 minutes later. But yet they put it in, or he suggested it later, which is another thing, you know? You can suggest to somebody, and you can implant things into people's memories, and they think at a later date, you can merely suggest something like, is that question, when did you stop beating your wife? You know, but I never beat my wife, you know? I guess that's not the exact same type of example, but the point is memories are not good. They're not good. This is one of the reasons why I just look at the justice system entirely, and I think I don't want the state to have the power to administer punishment and justice, because no matter how you slice it, secondhand justice is not justice. You know, justice that is outsourced, that's not justice. You know, DIY justice is justice. Eye for an eye kind of a thing. But I did it. You chopped off my arm, I'm going to chop off your arm. If that's what you want to do, if that's the way you want to live your life. You raped my sister, you're going to die in an alley. Nobody's going to know about it. That's justice. When you farm it out and you hire a bunch of people and expert testimony and this and that and this and that and this and that, and you let all these other things into these all the possibilities for the truth to be twisted and tortured, and and then something comes out on the other end that supposedly looks like justice, where somebody's in jail. I don't know. It's not justice, and when I look at so many people on the right and on the left, it's just humanity in general, but specifically over the last week, of people that they're thirsty for the perp walk. And who knows why they want the perp walk so bad, but they just want that perp walk, based on all the stories that they've told in their minds, even though very little of anything that people are wanting is practical at all. It's not practical. We just want to see everybody arrested. Okay. Well, we're not in El Salvador, so we don't have that kind of justice system, and kind of thank goodness for that. You can't just demand, just because the people are demanding a head on a spike, doesn't mean you give it to them, because the people are almost always wrong. They are, The people in Utah were wrong when they thought that I was living high on the hog because I sued the Mormon church. They were wrong. Doesn't matter how many people believe that story. Doesn't matter. You could have 100,000 people with degrees and credentialed that all repeat that story and say it's true, blah, blah, blah. If it ain't true, it ain't true. If the facts don't match, it's not true. And people seem to be really unhappy with that. And I'm not even going to get into whether or not all the stories that people made up about Epstein, or the blanks that were filled in, and he's Mossad, he's this, he's that, he's all these other things. Fine, might be. But the insistence that because you've invented this movie in your mind, that is the fact, is that's a problem. That's a problem. I was kind of like saying this with the how the internet. One of the reasons why the internet is really bad is because people with it's a confirmation bias engine, really. I mean, think about it. Back in the day, if you felt like you were a pony, if you thought, I think I'm a pony, and you lived in a small town, there were plenty of bullies around and plenty of people who love you around to remind you, you're not a pony. But now, if you think you're a pony, you can get online and you can find a support group of, hell, even if it's 10 other people. If there's 10 people that think they're ponies, suddenly your reality, somebody's validating your version of reality, your fantasy. There's no versions of reality. There's one version of reality. But you can find people to echo chamber your fantasy. And I see people doing that all the time, and you can see how the thing progresses, where this little detail gets flipped to maybe he is Mossad. Oh, what if he's Mossad? He could be Mossad, to he is, the billionaire from Victoria's Secret he is Mossad and Epstein is this, and then people are certain about it. And they might be right. They might be right. There's plenty of things to look at from this story that from a distance where you can go, okay, yeah. There's inconsistencies, blah, 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 blah. But part of the inconsistencies, you realize that there's always going to be inconsistencies when people are speculating. And you're always speculating when you don't have facts. When you don't have the facts, you're always speculating. Well, when people flip their speculations and get addicted to them, and they start building their reputations on them, and that's the big difference. The big difference now is that there are paper trails, and there's, in a way, more accountability. You know, you can go back to somebody's past tweets, you can go back to the internet. And so there's this incentive for people to weirdly double down rather than face the reality, which is, oh, well, I'm not going to be able to escape reality, you know? But they just want to double down. No, you're not telling me. It's that you're not telling me what I want to hear, therefore you're a liar. Which is probably true. The people are lying. But that's kind of irrelevant to the fact that if you don't know what the information is, you can't just claim that your version of reality, again, I said that again, I hate that. There is no versions of reality, that your perception is correct. And let me tell you something. It's not. It's correct from your point of view. Maybe. But you also invent shit. You're just as susceptible to filling in the blanks as anybody else. You know, I often think about this all the time because I've been told that I'm a creative person, and I like to just sit around and think about what if. Like that whole impulse to go, what if I sued the Mormon church? We call Jesus Christ to the stand, ha, 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 funny, making a piece of art. What if this, writing songs every day. There's a tendency to invent and embellish and stuff like that. And oftentimes I've done this a number of times where I've called people and I've said, hey, do you remember that time that this thing happened? I have this memory that it happened this way. Am I making things up? Am I filling in blanks? What's different? And then I'll hear their version of events, and sometimes it'll match, or they won't even remember the thing at all, or they'll remember it a totally different way. I write down my dreams every morning, if I can. I try to. I hit it about maybe 70% of the time. Other times they slip away. And it's just it's hard to remember a dream, and you have to start writing or you have to start the process of remembering. It's very delicate, because if your mind goes to something else, like, oh, there's a bird, it can just slip away, But oftentimes when I usually record my dreams. I just start talking about it. I hit the button on my notes app and I start recording what I remember. And as I'm remembering details, oftentimes more details will come in. Like you wake up with this sense that a lot of things happen, but you can only find a little bit, and you go, what am I forgetting? Damn, and it's just slipping away. That's one phenomenon, but there's another one that kind of happens sometimes too, where I get on a roll and I start talking about the dream and I start recording, and it all seems to be unfolding. And sometimes in that moment, I'm wondering, is this happening in the moment right now? Like, am I retrieving a memory from right before I woke up, or am I in a state where I'm kind of maybe half dreaming and half, am I creating the memory right now? Because sometimes I'll notice myself doing that stuff. Here's a strange thing. So sometimes you'll have dreams that are very, you can have sexual dreams or very weird dreams that are things that you wouldn't want to put in print, because if somebody took it the wrong way, they might think you actually did it. You know what I mean? But so sometimes there's this sense of editing, even in real time, where you go, I remember what the dream was. There was a shameful part of the dream, but I'm going to tell it in a way to cover my ass, you know, to make sure that if anybody stumbles upon it, I craft it slightly to preserve a little bit of dignity. Probably, I can guarantee that doesn't make the writing any better. It's like, I've told this story before, but about a year ago, I cracked open my journals from when I was 14, 13 and 14, and they're lies. I wrote lies in my own journal because thinking of the future potential audience, who might read this. And I was worried about what that person might think. Turns out that person was me, and that person thought, what the fuck is wrong with you? What is wrong with you, you stupid kid? Why are you lying? Why are you embellishing a story about how some girl totally likes you when she probably doesn't? Probably never did. You didn't have that information. Why are you fluffing up your own image, you weirdo? Anyway, that's a little bit of a tangent. But it's all kind of related because so much of what we experience in life is, again, I'm a broken record, but when you allow media, the news, print, anything that you have to, where you're getting information second, third, fourth hand, not first hand, not the stuff on your deck, not the stuff in your garden, not your family, not your friends, not how the water feels on your feet at the beach, not how your soil smells, not how chocolate tastes, but how somebody told you something happened, how a bomb was dropped in Gaza, or how this happened or that happened. That stuff is totally reliant upon your imagination filling in the blanks. It just is. You can't escape it. When you read a book, you're not experiencing their world at all. Isn't that crazy? You can just read these little squiggly lines on a page, and in your mind, you're imagining the field with smoke from the other end, and a frog, and the sounds of frogs, and the things that are in the writer's mind as they walk through this field. I mean, even you doing it now, you made a picture of a field that's probably not like the picture of the field that I had in my mind, but you're filling in blanks. Your imagination is creating an alternate fantasy. And to me, it's so easy to see how people confuse the things that they've imagined with reality. They think it's real. And they double down and they find their support groups. Oh, you want to chop off your dick? So do I. I don't know, man. It's the echo chamber effect is really bad. And I'm talking about people that I otherwise respect, I guess. I don't know. I just said that, and I realized that most of the people I communicate with over the internet, I've never met, or if I met them once, so there's no real connection or accountability then. So I mean, the idea that there's a respect there kind of seems like a blank has been filled in there too. Do you know what I mean? Think about your online friends that you don't know. How many blanks have you filled in? How many things about their life have you just filled in, and you had to, because you never met them in true life. So you probably had to imagine where they live. You might be doing that. You might imagine, where am I right now? I can describe to you. I'm laying down in my bed next to this little equipment system. My guitar's over here. I'm looking out a window. But see, even then, it's just like, unless it's video, I don't know. But even with video, Even with videos. So you go, oh, okay, I solved that problem. Now I see that person's living room or their bedroom or whatever. But you're still going to fill in the blanks of the other things. Well, where do they maybe eat, or where do, you know, we're always filling in blanks. We're always using our imaginations to fill in blanks. And I don't know. I don't know. It seems to me everybody's doing it. Maybe there's a type of person that aren't filling in blanks. But as far as I can tell, everybody's doing it. And most people are insisting that their imaginations or the things they imagine are somehow true. And they demand that they be validated. I demand, the left is doing, I demand you accept that I am a pony. I'm a cis or a gendered, what the fuck? I'm a retard, okay? But I demand that you accept that I'm a genius, little princess, you know? It's not a phenomenon that's just on the left. It's also on the right. I know the truth about Epstein. I know the truth about this. I know the truth about the Jews. I know the truth about this. You know, I know the truth about everything. The blanks that I've filled in, I demand they be validated. I demand you accept them. And I'm like, how about no? How about no? How about I don't have to accept your fantasy. I don't have to accept your imagination as being true, no matter how much you have a temper tantrum about it. You know? I demand that you resign because you didn't say the thing. I mean, honestly, there's a chance that these three people, the Kash Patels, Dan Bongino, and Pam Bondi, there's a chance that they've got a lot of egg on their face and they might be good people and they're just going, you know what? I thought one thing and I was wrong. They haven't said as much. They haven't said, you know what? I was wrong. I went around for a year saying I knew what was going on, but now that I get here and the details have changed, now that I see this, now that I saw this tape, I was wrong. Anyway, I don't even want to get into that because, again, just filling in blanks. I'm filling in blanks too. I'm writing a story about where they're innocent and they're being. We're going to have to do this. And the problem is because we're focusing on stories that are 100% reliant upon our imaginations, you know? And I think that is a problem. I think the more we get rooted and grounded in reality, first-hand knowledge, first-hand experience with your friends and family, eyeball to eyeball. I know this is a weird thing for me to preach because I couldn't be less interested in hanging out with people, but yeah, kind of a long meandering thing there. I think reality's better. You know, when you feel yourself getting upset about things that you've imagined, or upset about what you perceive to be reality, you just slow down and ask yourself, well, how many of the things am I upset about are things that I actually experienced? Or am I being upset about what somebody else says they experienced or what saying I should experience? And I think in this day of the internet, we spend way, way too much time being upset about imaginary things, you know? And I mean that literally, but I want to just remind, when I say imaginary, I'm not saying that there's not a reality tied to that imagination, but when I tell you that that I cut my toe off, you know, and you don't know me, and you weren't there to put the toe in a little Ziploc baggie with ice, you know? If it's just a story to you, then it's kind of imaginary, you know? I don't know. The impulse, the empathetic impulse, that's nice and that's wonderful, but you kind of got to focus. You kind of got to stay focused on what really matters to me, what really matters. And what really matters is your comfort, your health, your pets, the cleanliness of your house, you know? Do things look nice? Are you comfortable? Do you like your shoes? You know, that kind of stuff. So yeah, concern yourself with that kind of stuff. I guess that's all you can do, because the Lord knows you can't do anything about Epstein. You can't do anything about Trump. I mean, I don't want to make you feel helpless. You can scream and yell on the internet. You can join a thing and sign a petition. You know, and if you want to do that stuff, great. If it makes you happy, I would say though, meet with people face to face to make it happen. If it's just screaming and yelling on the internet, retweeting, reposting, re-raging, that's probably not going to be good for you. But what do I know? What do I know? You might be getting something out of it. I don't know. But I'll tell you something. I didn't sue the Mormon church. But how cool would it have been if I had? Huh? Anyway, believe what you want to believe. See if I give a shit. Unnecessary outro song to